Hello and welcome back to On the Rocks, one of the mining industry's leading podcasts, where we explore the future of mining over a drink of choice. I'm Jess, Prospector's head of new media, and I'm excited to introduce today's Masterclass episode. Today we are digging into one of the most fascinating intersections in modern mining, how tiny microbes are solving massive extraction challenges. Our guest is Dr. Liz Dennett, founder and CEO of Endolith, whose journey from NASA astrobiology to founding a biomining company reads kind of like a sci-fi adventure story. With a background in studying life in extreme environments and experience as former VP at Wood Mackenzie and AWS Lead Solutions architect, Liz brings a unique perspective on merging biotechnology with traditional mining processes. In this masterclass, Liz will explain how her company is using nature's oldest miners, extremophile microbes that thrive in sulfuric acid and extreme temperatures, to dramatically increase copper recovery rates from low-grade ores. This conversation couldn't be more timely. As Liz points out, between now and 2050, the world needs more copper than in all of human history combined, driven by electrification, data centers, and the green energy transition. But with average copper ore grades dropping, we need revolutionary approaches to extract more metal from what we're already mining. So grab your caffeinated beverage of choice as Emily sits down with Liz to explore how billion-year-old microbes might just hold the key to our copper supply challenges. Take it away, Emily.
All right, Liz, welcome to On the Rocks. Can't wait to have you on here with everybody today. How are you doing?
I am great. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. I know you and I have had a few conversations, and every time we talk, we just geek out so much, and we're like, we should have recorded that. So it's so cool to actually have a witness to our geek out.
That's it. Absolutely. And for everybody listening, we've already geeked out about several things just before we even started the recording. So we are off to a roll. And Liz, you and I both are not doing any bourbon or anything similar today, but we are both drinking caffeinated beverages out of classy mugs, right? Wow. Not a Red Bull can in my case. And you want to talk about the mug that you're drinking your coffee out of?
Yeah, so I have my Red M mug. Red M is a really interesting organization. It was founded by David Reed in Texas, and it brings awareness to human trafficking, which is something that I always thought kind of lived in the shadows and wasn't a thing, but apparently it's much more prevalent through many of my former coworkers' kids have people that have actually been exposed to or been potential victims of human trafficking, which is just eye-opening.
Mind-boggling, right? Yeah, it's so crazy. Well, great to give them a little bit of a little awareness for our whole community. So listeners, certainly go check out Red M and the great work that they do. Now, so I wanted to kick it off, and of course, we're doing this as a masterclass episode. Our listeners know, which has been really fun. So the point being to geek out as much as possible. And today we're going to be talking about how tiny microbes solve big extraction challenges. But first, I wanted to have you share a little bit with the listeners about your own personal background. You have a journey where you went from NASA astrobiology to founding a biomining company, which is so fascinating. Could you kind of start just by sharing that story of how you went from studying life in extreme environments to creating Endolith?
So it's an interesting one. I grew up in a little town in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, somewhere between Palmer and Wasilla and Anchorage, the kind of place where if you have grown up in a pretty rural environment, you know that there's just a level of tenacity that comes with it. You, in many ways, are like these extremophilic microbes. I ended up getting my PhD in the coolest thing I'd ever heard about, which is the origin of life on early Earth as a proxy for Mars, this thing called astrobiology. It actually turned out that I studied how microbes oxidize and reduce iron and sulfur phases. And anyone who's met me in person knows that I will talk at you about that until you have fallen asleep. You are just like walking away, and I'll still be like, no, here's the thing about redox cycling.
Yeah. There's more. Yeah.
After that, I went to work for an oil and gas company. I then went to work for an incredible startup in San Diego before facing, I think, the quandary that a lot of 30-somethings face these days, which is, do I get an MBA and become an expert at so many things like financial modeling, or do I do something else? And for me, that's something else. And what I really wanted to do was learn about computer science and the cloud. So I managed to get a job at AWS or at Amazon building their cloud-based energy systems. And this is where you and I have a lot of overlap of taking this like hard rock skill set and then just going to do something in the cloud or with tech. I did that for a few years before going to Wood Mackenzie to lead some data architecture and data engineering groups there. Then I joined a CTO of Sembita before spinning out and taking the helm of Endolith, where we are using nature's oldest miners, microbes, to get more copper out of low-grade ores.
Which I think, again, you guys, we have so much in kind of parallel tracks and in common, but love that there's this, connection between your different career phases, right? Like so much that from where you started, of course, that you use right now, but also pulling from these other pathways along the way.
You've done field work in places that I dream of doing field work.
Come on down.
Of me rock climbing here in Golden because it reminds me that rocks exist from my supply closet. And hearing about your stories and adventures, I'm just like, that is the road less traveled. My background's crazy, but yours is also crazy in such a cool way.
Well, yeah, that's one word for it. And I wish I could rock. I need to be in better shape and start rock climbing. That would be great. And I know that's where so much of it too, though, is like just being outside and enjoying the natural world, right? Growing up in rural places, I think for both you and I even, like created such a natural, aspect to getting into this space.
And there's something too about having deep appreciation for the natural world and also working at extractive industries. And it's so many times seen as this paradox or like, how can you work with mining companies? You're an environmentalist. And it's like, no. I work with mining companies because I care about the environment. I became an oil and gas geologist because I'm so passionate about the environment. And just having those really difficult conversations is very eye-opening, I think.
Yeah, and I think at least for me, growing up in a really rural setting, spending so much time outside, you literally kind of have this awe of things that, in the natural world that creates a scientific curiosity, I think, for a lot of people, or at least that even folks who didn't go into science, like if you grow up hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, all of that stuff, you're just way more aware of your natural surrounding. And I think that opens up so much about how did the world get to where it is, right? Why is it the way that it is? And being really connected to it, which I wish our industry kind of pulled more of that in, right?
Yeah.
As far as the why we do what we do.
And to your point around awe and wonder, I think there's so many just fundamental human experiences when you're out there, like when the Grand Canyon's an easy example, because they actually have a point that's called like, ooh, an awe point or something like that. But I definitely like to punctuate my life with those moments that take your breath away, whether it's being in Alaska and just looking at these incredible mountains or going up to a multi-pitch climb and being like, this is definitely the definition of type 2 fun. But still like a human level, there's something that is really, I think, fulfilling about that, because that's what our ancestors have done. That's what hopefully future generations will be able to do, is also in many ways have that connection to the land. And I know that runs really deep within many communities of Alaska. And it's really cool to spread my wings and be a steward of that.
I love that. And so then let's talk a little bit about, why does the kind of innovation that you're working on matter so much right now? Like, especially with the focus on copper and electrification, like how is this the right moment to connect all of that together?
Yeah, so the lack of access to copper and the lack of copper in the next 20 years, 10 years is the thing that keeps me awake at night these days. Between now and 2050, the world needs more copper than in the history of human civilization, mostly because our ancestors have used a lot of the easy to get to copper. Like the Bronze Age, that's copper. Our ancestors used it. And now when we look at things like generative AI, a data center uses 10 to 15 tons of copper. Electric vehicles, 5 to 12 times more copper. Wind turbines, grid electrification projects, they need significantly more copper than things like diesel generators. And so as we continue on this trajectory where we see acceleration of these new technologies, and we really look at electrification as something that will be a rising tide for all citizens of the planet, is the backbone. When you flip the light switch on, those electrons are running through copper wires, because second to silver, it's the best conductor out there, and it's by far the cheapest conductor. And
there's a great saying that we even made stickers on one day for Prospector. Like, there's no such thing as electric bamboo, right? Like you can't move the electrons, at least not yet, through organic or grown material. Like you to use metal. And
it's metallic bonds. It's how the electrons channel through them. It's like a fundamental first principle thing of Chem 101.
Yeah. Well, and I'm always blown away, especially where, some listeners may remember we're doing a big project in Guyana right now in South America, wonderful developing country. And I always tell people, just the electrification of the planet, you take a country like Guyana or anywhere else in the world that's growing rapidly, the number one thing that people want access to is reliable electricity. The number one thing they invest in, or maybe not the number one, but one of the top things they invest in when they start to have disposable income is our, appliances and air conditioning and all these things that require electricity and copper in order to work. So the more the world at large, as you said, starts to, develop and become more economically stable, it actually will have an exponential demand for copper, even just that. Forget about all the green, energy and new, all of that low carbon stuff, just basic electricity being spread out more throughout the world's population, to your point, has a huge demand.
And those are things that we take for granted. Yeah. Growing up in Alaska, there were always days that we didn't have power because the grid was not great. Yeah. I've actually had just as many power outages when I was in Houston because that grid is under massive, massive amounts of stress.
Yeah.
And the things that really affect you the most without power outage are AC units. And if you have electric heating, or your ability to eat food because your refrigerator is maybe not working, or your ability to have running water because you have an electric pump. Those are such foundational to our lives as in a developed country. And I take it for granted. And I know that my carbon footprint, just by nature of the lifestyle I live, is significantly bigger than a lot of others. And I think with that privilege, though, as Voltaire and Stan Lee once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And with that, we at Endolith, and myself especially, are at a really unique junction to kind of stare at that and not feel powerless. What can I do to have some type of global impact?
Yeah. So let's dig in a little bit to that. So explain the science behind your approach. How do you use microbes to extract copper from ore?
So microbes have been around for billions of years. They live in pretty much every environment on Earth, aside from ones that are like molten lava, where it is just physically too unstable, but they live everywhere. You have 10 times more microbial cells than people cells within you. Mm-hmm. And they have this ability to facilitate a lot of redox reactions, or to facilitate breakdown of things like chalcopyrite, things like pyrite. We take those endogenous properties and we use AI optimization so that we can create an entire system, a plug and play system with these hydrometallurgical processes, so that we can unlock copper from this ore. Hmm. One of the ways to think about it is we take these nature's oldest miners, these microbes, and we run them through an Olympic type boot camp. We get them really, really good at what they do, whether it's breaking down really recalcitrant tough ores like energite and tennantite that have arsenic in them, or whether it's things like bornite and chalcopyrite that are pretty hard to just recover by themselves. And then we use AI fine tuning as we deploy them into the heaps, so that as these hydrometallurgical heaps change, we're able to make sure we have the right microbes at the right time. And we can, instead of getting maybe 20 to 50, maybe 60% of the copper out, we can get significantly more.
And Liz, just for our listeners who may not be mining people or geology people, we have a lot of kind of folks who are new to the space. Could you explain for a second the difference between rocks and ore and the metal, right? Because I just think we kind of talk about that so much, and maybe folks don't understand what these, what those different things mean, all the different words there.
Yeah, I'm going to try to use an analogy, and I'm going to count on you. It's the first thing that came to my mind, and if it's not good, let's fix it. Yeah. So the analogy I'd always use when I was teaching is that rocks are like chocolate chip cookies, and the minerals are like the things that go into the cookies. They're the chocolate chips, they're the eggs, they're the different pieces. And in many ways, when we're dealing with ore bodies, the material that we want is in those cookies. Mm-hmm. It can be really, really low percentage. If we're looking at a chocolate chip cookie, we're pretty much trying to get the salt out of it. And you know that you maybe put in a pinch of salt in that entire chocolate chip cookie. That is really what we are working at. And some other ore bodies, the ones that you might be more familiar with from like cartoons, you're expecting to see big veins of deposits like big chocolate chips. And unfortunately, most of the copper isn't actually mined that way.
Mm. And that's where you have to, and there are different types of ore body, right? Different types of ore depending on the mixture or the blend of the ingredients. You get different ore body ore types. And that's why you're saying, you have to fine tune what you're doing to match that specific ore. Yeah.
And the way that I mentioned hydrometallurgy a few times, and the way that's done is you take these ores that are typically pretty low grade. Just for some sense check, about a century ago, average copper ore grades were around 3%, and now they're 0.7%. They're rapidly diminishing. So they take those ore grades, they crush them, and they form these giant piles. They look like this, and then they put irrigation systems on them that spray essentially sulfuric acid, but it's mixed potentially with a few other things. That sulfuric acid percolates down these rocks. It catalyzes a variety of reactions, and copper will liberate into solution. It'll get carried along a little ride, go into these ponds as PLS or pregnant leach solution, and then it'll be electroplated out. And you'll get these giant sheets of copper that can go to market. What we do is our microbes, they love sulfuric acid, they love extreme environments. So we hook them up to those sulfuric acid sprinkler systems, and the microbes go on a one-way journey where once they are in the heaps, they actually eat the rock essentially, and that can help them liberate copper a lot quicker and liberate more of it.
So I know you've had some phenomenal results with this, with increasing the recovery rate on the copper. So this can be used in addition to the existing process, right? It supplements the existing process. So talk a little bit about how much more copper you've been able to help companies get out.
So we are seeing anywhere between 10 and 80% additional copper. It depends on the ore type. It depends on the temperature. It depends on secondary minerals, but it's designed to really be plug and play and be a +1 to any existing technologies that are already at play. Mining companies are really sophisticated. They've been trying to increase copper recovery rates for decades. There's a lot of chemical approaches, a lot of electrochemical approaches, and we really think that combined with the microbes, it's a 1 + 1 = 5 or = 6 type approach. These microbes are incredibly hardy. We have studied thousands of different samples at a level of intensity that I think would make a lot of academics drool. Saying as a former academic, we have an incredible team.
When you say they're super hardy, so how is it that all the chemicals that are used in this process don't kill the microbes?
And they're extremophiles. So you've heard of extremophiles. These are the types of microbes that can live at those black smokers at the bottom of chimneys, at the bottom of the ocean. These microbes live in sulfuric acid. We are talking pH 1 to pH 2. They also live at different temperatures. They can live up to 70 degrees C, the kind of environment that you should definitely wear all of your PPE and safety gear going anywhere near. But since they've had so much time on Earth, they've evolved a lot of different techniques and genetic evolutionary capabilities so that they can up-level even things like really, really salty environments. They can stand really high solute concentrations.
So these really are ancient microbes. It's not like you engineered some new Jurassic Park. I mean, it's more like a Jurassic Park story than it is a new alien microbe that you brought down.
We do not use traditional genetic modifying techniques. We don't use CRISPR-Cas9. And there's a lot of thought around that. Different groups have been thinking about using them. The analogy I like to use is if you hear a little voice, I have a little puppy who is just woke up. She'll come say hi real quickly.
Yes.
It's Delta.
Hi, Delta. Oh, lots of kisses.
She's hypoallergenic. She is a mix of a bunch of different things, and she's secretly a velociraptor.
Yeah.
What she is not is a street smart, wonderful dog. The first dog I ever had in Alaska was this brown mutt named Ginger, and I got her from the pound. And that dog, I'm pretty sure, lived off of garbage from the garbage can and pond water. That dog was the most resilient dog ever. If I don't feed this dog lunch in 27 minutes, she will probably not be very happy. And to me, that's the difference between microbes that are more genetically modified versus environmental consortia that are more like that brown mutt that I grew up with in Alaska.
So that's the thing. Is that I'm picturing non-GMO microbes. Is that something that people should pay attention to? I don't even know.
It depends where you are. There are a lot of regulations and different mining companies have different risk tolerances. For us, we found that non-GMO microbes have the quickest time to market. We have different communities of them. And we believe that many hands make light work, just like we have an incredible team of humans here with microbial communities that have many different members. You get resiliency, you get redundancy. And typically, if you're working with more one-on-one genetic modification, it tends to be one microbe. And the example, too, that comes to mind is the bananas we're eating now. We have a monoculture of bananas, and they're actually at risk of dying out due to climate change because we've over-engineered one type of banana.
Well, here in Florida, a lot of people have bananas in their backyard. And I would say one of our neighbors, they have been growing this, I don't know if it's new or maybe it's just a new name. It's called ice cream bananas. Have you heard of this?
No,
They
it's
really
not.
do, like taste like vanilla ice cream, like especially so if you put them in the freezer and just kind of mash them up, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, yeah, no, I'm with you. Because regular grocery store bananas, I'm like, there's no flavor there. I don't know what this is. And anytime I travel, South America or anything, like the bananas are so much better. But ice cream bananas, I think, are going to be the next big thing.
I'm so here for this. It's like the first time I went to Hawaii, my dad had family that grew up there and was like, you have to try these apple bananas. And so I go into this Asian grocery store and I'm like, apple bananas?
Right.
And I buy like this armload full of these little tiny bananas. The skin is so thick. And I remember trying one for the first time. I think I have a picture probably on Facebook or somewhere. And I'm just like, this is magic. They're so good. They're like tart and tangy. And I don't have the right lexicon to describe the nuanced complexity of that flavor.
Yeah. Well, and it's something totally, right, grows in a completely different environment with all these different, that's, so speaking of environments, like where do you like harvest your microbes from then? Like where are they? Like
in the fridge and freezer that we've been working for years and years. A variety of different locations, including lots of places where we've had freedom to operate. We have close relationships with Semvita, which is a company that we used to be a part of, and they had a great bioprospecting team that really amplified a lot of the work we're doing now. And it's actually tricky. You cannot just go out to any environment and get a sample and use it. You have to have full freedom to operate. You have to be able to track down the legal lineage of all of these things. It's much more nuanced than the layperson might think.
That's something I'd never, bioprospecting?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Love that. Okay. So now we kind of know where they're coming from and kind of why we're using them.
30 more seconds about bioprospecting. I used to run a team of bioprospectors. Annette was here, Heather was here, a few other people. They were like the Indiana Jones of environmental microbiology. Like some of these bioprospectors out there are like, I'm going into that cave. I'm going to get that deposit. I am going here. And they have such a sense of like adventure and respect for the environment when they go to do it. And then we're able to catalyze seeing what's out there and doing full genomic analysis. It's fascinating.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah. I can only imagine, like my husband, Mark, works with us and our team on all of our exploration, runs all of our operations and logistics, and talks about how we have free range geologists. And it's just very difficult to keep a geologist like on track and doing, just wandering off like a chicken. I can only imagine what those prospectors are like. Yeah. Mark would have a challenge. Yeah.
You say that, but I have one of my most prized possessions is this rock hammer here. It's from the Oklahoma City Geological Society when I gave a talk on May 16th, 2018. Why do I have a rock hammer in my office? Is it for hanging up pictures? Or is it because one day I'll get the call and I'll have to go on a last minute sampling site and they're going to need geologists?
They're going to need,
Like every now and then you're on a plane and they're like, is there a doctor on the plane? One day they're going to say, is there a doctor of geomicrobiology/geology here? And I will be like, well, you can't actually take this.
You can't take those on the plane. That would be I was tried by accident. And it was not happy. Yeah.
That day will happen one day. I have complete illusion that I will be called to, save, identify like the forest rider phaelite in an olivine complex somewhere, get a gold star in 10,000 miles.
Well, it's like I always say that movie Armageddon, right? Where they have to like drill and blow up the asteroid. I'm like, it should never have been an oil and gas drilling team that did that. That would have been a mining drilling team in the real world. And like, they would have called our folks first, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you want stuff blown up with rocks, so you just wait, the call's coming.
You heard it here first. When they call me, I'm going to call you, and we're both going to be out there.
We're going together. I can see the movie in my head. I'm writing the script. Absolutely.
A flock of free-range geologists and mining engineers just following us like little babies. It'll be amazing.
Exactly. Well, to try to go back on track with with what you guys are doing, though, but really like looking at the future impact, talking a little bit of sci-fi and all that stuff, how does biomining fit, do you think, in the, kind of the future of mineral extraction and sustainability? Where does it fit with all this new stuff that's coming out, or at least being talked about?
I think it is absolutely key. It is mission critical. Mining industry has been trying to use biomining at scale for the past 30 or 40 years, and they've never really been able to make it work until now. And part of that is the cloud computing pieces we're tying together. Most of it is the team we have here is an incredible team. We are facing unprecedented demand and unprecedented geologic complexity. Mm-hmm. With those challenges and with the needs we have, I truly believe that microbes are going to be at the forefront, just like they are in so many other environmental applications. Sometimes microbes can be tricky. They do not speak English. You have to corral them and be a little bit of a microbe whisperer. Yeah. But that said, they do respond to things like broader environmental control, pieces like that. In terms of the potential with mining, you know better than I do that new mines typically take 10 to 16 years from discovery to first ore. And I think the best place to find copper is where we've already found copper. Like, where's copper? It's much easier to be like, oh, here are existing mines. Right. And so for us, if we can squeeze every single drop of copper out of it, if we can even go to some of the mineralized waste deposits, and if we can really increase recovery, that enables us to fundamentally contribute more copper to the global supply chain, which is my mission in life, but also to work with the companies that are mining to ultimately minimize the environmental footprint on the planet.
And how does it work right now for you, like with the stage that Endolith is at? Like if a company wants to integrate, this tech into what they're doing, are you all ready to scale at that level, or where are you in terms of commercialization and all that kind of stuff?
We have signed JDAs, we have signed field deployment agreements. If you are ready to rock, like if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, actually I have low grade ore, send it to us. Let's test it. Let's figure out which microbial communities like it. Our integration is designed to be plug and play from the ground up. We don't need to shut down your mine. We don't need to build a lot of expensive infrastructure. Everything is mobilized. We can bring it over on flatbed trailers or in connexes, and we can deploy it fully plug and play. We also have a cloud dashboard so that we can show you what we're doing. Because I mentioned earlier that microbes do not speak English. It can be a little bit challenging to know what's happening. And so to really unpack that heap leaching black box, we've developed some pretty sophisticated tools to show what's happening, how we're bringing in different microbes, and ultimately prove the value. Because it's cool as a sci-fi novel or a science experiment, but that's not where we want to be. We want to be saying, yeah, we got a lot more copper out thanks to Endolith.
And how do you do that? I mean, like, what is the actual kind of AI or the data that you're measuring or tracking? Like, what are you looking at and then running AI on in order to see what's happening?
We look at every system we have in-house. We have a PLC and a SCADA system hooked up. So I can pull up a dashboard and show you what is happening in our columns. It's a level of technical sophistication I've always dreamed about. In the field, we'll have full remote monitoring capabilities of the bioreactors we're growing. We'll be able to know how the microbes are thriving when they're going in. We've done a lot of work too on lab scale testing where we will feed in our microbes along with the raffinate, and we will get out the fluid at the bottom. And we'll also look at what microbe communities we're feeding in, what microbial communities we're getting out. And then at the end of the day, we'll crack open all of our tests, especially the columns, and look at which microbes have colonized different depths. Because a lot of nuanced diversity around how microbes grow, how they catalyze reactions. And we have a lot of trade secret knowledge around that, which helps us as we scale up to know, we know what we're feeding in, we know what we're getting out. And so based on that, we know what's setting up shop. Yeah.
And then taking that along with the actual recovery, I would assume, being able to see what's actually coming out at the end, which the client or the company can see that their recovery is going up, right? Yeah.
And then these heaps are incredibly dynamic systems. They have microchanneling, they change temperatures, they change pH, they change EH. And so we monitor those using a number of different techniques so that we know as these heaps go through these progressions that we're able to have the right microbes at the right time.
Well, and I know, I mean, the fact that you guys kind of plug and play is probably a huge deal, because anytime you're going into an operating mine or mill situation, right, a lot of them have been around for a long time with pre-existing systems, pre-existing being code for old and sometimes antiquated, right, from a technology perspective. So it doesn't have to be this thing where they have to like rework all of their like monitoring of stuff for it to work. Yeah.
And I mean, we, like, our leadership team here is absolutely incredible. Christy has 30 plus years at places like Freeport building these huge heaps. Andrew, our CFO, was at BHP for 20 years, and Renee has 20 plus years at BHP and Freeport. So we're a team of mining engineers talking to other mining engineers. I am the weird outlier CEO with the blue purple hair and the PhD. But with that, we love the weird wonky ores. When people come to us and they're like, I have a really good quality, it's like, okay, that's great. But when they're like, oh, I have this marginal deposit, I don't know how we're going to make it work. That is where we really find personally the most fulfillment, because turning things that are marginal or uneconomical and really liberating the copper out of them, especially from brownfield deposits, that is a huge way to have immediate value today.
Okay. And I should have asked this at the beginning for our listeners, like, does it only work on copper, or are you only focused on copper because of the kind of global dynamics you talked about?
Today, we are running to the field with copper. We have done a fair amount of work on lithium clays also with Arizona Lithium. We've done some work on nickel laterites. We've done some work on iron. I like to say in startup world that cash is king, focus is queen, and you have to earn the right to become a platform. It's really easy to go out there and just be like, we're going to be a platform for all of these things. But it's a stage startup. We got to reality check ourselves. We're 12 or 15 people in 2 labs in Denver. We need to prove our worth first.
Yeah, prove that it works. But the kind of science behind it, though, eventually could be adapted for other types of ores, other types of extraction. Yeah.
We've shown a huge decrease in gangue materials, especially for lithium clay. And it has a lot of plug and play, like drop-in applicability across a lot of these mining flow sheets.
And is that because of the flow sheet design, or is it certain things that microbes love, or if you don't have those things present, the microbes are unhappy and they do not want to?
If you are using sulfuric acid for a process, you might be really good at breaking down a lot of certain kinds of minerals. But what we do is we grow up microbes, and you can think of them like biolixiviants, where sulfuric acid is a lixiviant. This is the biolixiviant. Those biolixiviants have very unique properties. It's not just what they're creating. It's not just the microbes, but those microbes on the outside of their membranes, they have little wires. They have proteins that are really electronegative. They have a very heterogeneous, nuanced environment. So it's kind of like this microbial soup. And when you expose that to different rocks, going back to that chocolate chip cookie example, they really preferentially will break down certain pieces. So they're great at breaking down certain carbonates, and we can grow and tailor the microbes to what we are trying to do. It also means you don't have to build a new sulfuric acid plant, and those can be pretty nasty sometimes in terms of SOx emissions.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. These days is thinking about, critical minerals and talking about it, and rare earths. I know that's where a lot of folks' brain goes. And of course, like I remind people, like copper is a critical mineral, right? Probably one of the most critical for all the things we care about. But just thinking about where the technology and just the general integration of biology with mining, where it's headed, in the next decade or 2 decades.
Yeah, it's a really cool time to be at that junction, especially given that, for instance, the price of genomics has been falling below Moore's law for a while. The price per genome continues to get lower and lower. We are able to do things that, 15 years ago in grad school, I would have just dreamed about.
Yeah. Well, and so what have been some of your coolest, or wildest on the ground mining moments so far? What has shocked you coming out of grad school?
Oh, so much. I think the awareness of copper and the fact that I can go into most rooms and people are like, yeah, I care about copper. I'm like, what? You investors, you lay people, you person sitting next to me on an airplane, and care about copper. That level of technical literacy creeping into the public debate has been massive. Also, understanding the nuanced geopolitical pieces, especially in the past year, look at how we can leverage America's mineral estate as a key part of national security. I think that has really surprised me, especially coming from some of my friends in Denver who historically have been much more resistant to anything that's net extractive.
Yeah. No, I think just absolutely. I can't believe from the time I started working, as one example, around rare earths with like a carbonatite deposit, that would have been back in like 2009, 2010, and nobody knew what rare earths were. I mean, people did who, were involved in the sector and that type of stuff. But you really had no awareness of what that meant outside of the mining space, and maybe a few public policy people who understood what the rare earths and some of these other niche minerals were used for. And the fact that it's like regularly in the newspaper now, I mean, and even back then, like China cut off supplies to rare earths back in 2010, right? It's not like this is the first time, but just the general kind of familiarity because of geopolitics with it, I'm shocked at. Like I'm constantly surprised that people talk about it who aren't mining people.
Do you ever get kind of weirded out that mining is now cool and in vogue? And when you talk to people, they're like, mining, that's awesome. You're like,
well, living in South Florida, usually when I say I'm in mining, people think I mean like Bitcoin mining, crypto. I'm like, no, rocks, like real rocks. But yeah, then they think it's really cool. And I'm usually, I mean, in general, in the US, I'm like the only person who's like, geology, mining related that most folks have ever met. They might have like a crazy cousin or something. But
that's a geologist.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So no, I do. I think it's great that it's becoming at least more, people are more aware. So I think it's hopefully our industry can rise to the moment and capitalize on that, right? To really like take a position of leadership. Is what I hope, that we don't let it kind of pass us by. But
I agree. And to your credit, you are doing everything you can with your platform to really amplify that, because we are speaking through a connection that is entirely on mined material. My laptop is on mined material. The power cord is based in mined material. As we continue to grow and expand, I do not see bamboo replacing that anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I think that's where, again, the more we can, I would think back on, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, I was asked to go out to a Stanford event on like battery metals. And they said, can you come talk, just do like a little mining 101 session for all these battery engineers? Because like, they should, if they're developing new battery tech, they should know what's going to be available, right?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because we always sort of have a saying, like, there's no such thing as a magical lithium fairy, right? Like, it's not just going to show up, right? And just be there for you. And I know it's the same, with what you work on. Mining is such a long lead time business, so cyclical. There's so many complicated things that go into having, a co-product or byproduct mineral in particular come online when you need it, that it's, yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating that these groups who maybe before really didn't think that they were tied in any way to the industry now really realize, like, hey, if we're going to go develop new stuff, whether it's a new, chip technology or data center technology or just batteries for electric vehicles or anything like that, like, we have to be more aware of who's supplying it, where is it coming from, how am I exposed to risk, and just literally, will there be enough of it for what we want to do?
Yeah, I think with the advances I've seen in quantum, and I've been such a skeptic of quantum for the past 5 or 6 years, and I'm like, I will believe it when I see stable qubits, bring it on. But even with a lot of the novel chip architecture that's coming, we are growing exponentially faster. I think of a lot of crazy stuff. I did not anticipate generative AI becoming this much of a mainstay in everyone's life. And the power needs, the compute needs, the critical mineral needs are astronomical.
Yeah, it's huge. And again, I think like we've been talking about, there's this awareness, which is great, but then there has to be actual like action.
Yeah. What do you do with that?
You do. And how do we kind of make good, smart policies around what should be developed and how, and who gets to make those decisions. And, you can't move so fast that we've learned so many lessons in mining about stakeholder engagement, environmental safety, and preservation. Like, we can't move so fast that we break all the things that we've spent so much time talking about protecting, right? But also, like,
having the social license to operate, like, that is a big one. Growing up in Alaska, we're now part of the Alaska Critical Minerals Cooperative, headed by Dr. Leanne Monk, who's one of my former geology professors from 20 years ago. But it's UAA and UAF, and they've brought a few native corporations on board to really look at how we can bring new technologies to the 49th state. Yeah. But it's absolutely fascinating, because my take is always, if we can make this work in Alaska, we can make it work anywhere. And to your point, though, all of those things are overlapped in such a microcosm of Alaska. I mean, even look at what's happened with Pebble Mine and the social license to operate, and balancing the needs of the country, the needs of the planet, with the needs of the people in the land. It's a fascinating junction right now.
Yeah, and it's a discussion that's happening all over the world, right? It's amazing for such a global industry. It's such a small world.
It really is.
Yeah. So, well, it's been so fun to chat with you, and I'm really excited. I hope our listeners go check out biomining and dig in a little deeper to everything that you all are doing. And I'm really excited to follow along and keep up to date with all the cool new stuff. So congrats on everything.
If anyone wants to learn more, they can go to endolithmining.com. They can check me out on LinkedIn. I post a lot. And we'd love to partner with anyone who cares about low-grade copper ores half as much as I do.
Yeah. No, I think I hope you get a bunch of calls from this. So thanks so much for coming on the Rocks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of On the Rocks. If you enjoyed today's masterclass, be sure to check out our other episodes featuring cutting-edge innovations in the mining industry. And if you're interested in being a guest or sponsoring an episode of On the Rocks, please email us at media@prospectorportal.com. Cheers for now, and we will see you later for another round of On the Rocks.